What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another review, and this time we're taking a look at Mimic 2, the sequel to the 1997 original. This movie features no returning cast members from the first movie, and Guillermo del Toro is replaced by Jean de Zeganac. If I said his name wrong, I am sorry. The basic premise of Mimic 2 is this. It takes place 4 years later, and the mutated bugs from the last movie have evolved to now mimic their only predator, being mankind. So yeah, that's the overall plot line of Mimic 2. Let's just briefly go over it. Overall, I think Mimic 2 was alright. I didn't particularly think this movie was anything special. It clearly does not have the flash, nor the finesse, nor the craftsmanship of a Del Toro. But at the end of the day, it is decently made. It's not a bad movie per se, but it's not a movie it's not really a movie that adds anything interesting from a story standpoint. From an evolution of the bug creatures, yeah, it does add some interesting things to lore. How now they can actually imitate humans and disguise themselves as humans. That's a pretty cool concept that was explored in this movie. I got nothing against that. In terms of the overall characters, I don't think any of these actors put on any memorable performances. Their performances weren't bad. The performances in this movie were not bad, but they weren't groundbreaking either. They were passable. It was what you expect from a direct-to-video movie. It was decent. The characters of Remy and Blasky, they were the only two characters that kind of sort of stood out. Remy, she's a school teacher who's a school teacher, and that's pretty much her trope. She's a school teacher, and whenever she has a bad date, she takes Polaroids of herself as a way to remind herself of these bad dates. Okay. All right, that's nothing horrible. I mean, she's also someone who's obsessed with bugs, kind of like Mia Servino's character from the first movie, whatever. And then you have Blasky, who's basically a police detective who's trying to solve a series of murders. Apparently, he's found victims with their faces ripped off. And this is how the mimic creature is able to mimic its prey, by ripping off their faces and disguising itself as them. All right, so you got that whole plot line. It was fine for what it was. Nothing really all that special or spectacular. And then you have some side characters like these two kids that hang around with Remy. They're okay. They don't really add anything to the table. I mean, there's this really uncomfortable subplot with one of the kids named Nikki who has a crush on his teacher, and they literally show a scene near the end of him groping her. It's like, I don't need to see that. That's just weird. There are certain things that don't need to be seen, and a kid fondling a grown adult, I don't need to see that in a sexual way. I mean, luckily Remy is not for that life, so I give her appreciation for that. So yeah, in terms of the characters, they're okay. They're nothing spectacular, nothing really all that thought-provoking. I don't even think their development is anything all that special, to be honest with you. I just think they're there. They're very stock. They're not as memorable as Peter or as Susan or as Josh or Manny or Chewie, or the MTA, or Charles Dutton's character, I can't remember what his character's name was. I just know he was an MTA officer. But they're not as memorable as the cast from the first movie. Maybe because those actors from the first movie are actually very, very talented actors, and they know how to work. Like the cast in this movie. I mean, you got some talent like John Polito, who makes an appearance in this movie as a school principal. It's always fun to see John Polito in a movie. He's got that gruff exterior, but he also has like a nice, a sardonic sense of humor to him. So I appreciate that. And Bruno Campos as Blansky. He's really not that bad in the movie. He's decent enough. In terms of the special effects, they don't look that bad actually. There's a lot of practical effects, and they look pretty good. The CG does not look that great. I think the CG doesn't look that great in this movie, because this movie is really well lit compared to the first movie. Del Toro was smart to basically keep a lot of his movie in shadows, and that contrasted very well with the look of the mimic creature. Because it was kept in shadow, it masked some of the problems that you could face with the CG effects. Del Toro and also it just made for a very cool, gritty, gothic setting by keeping it in shadow. Everything is just really well lit, and you can see the really bad effects when they're prominent. The practical effects look decent enough. I'm not gonna lie. I think the creatures look pretty cool this time around because they actually have more. To me, have some more detail to them. So I appreciate that. But the CG effects, yeesh, they have not aged well. And this movie came out in 2001. They have not aged well at all. By 2001, Titanic was already about, I don't know, about 3 or 4 years old. So it's no excuse to have effects as bad as this. And there are actual movies that were direct to video that had better special effects. So yeah, that was a bit of a yikes on that one. But for the most part, the special effects were fine. In terms of the directing, this was a worksman job. I mean, I give Jean de Chanoc credit for trying to mimic, no pun intended, the style of Guillermo del Toro, but you can tell that he does not have his sensibilities nor his talent. Del Toro is a fantastic visual artist, and if someone tries to copy his work, you can tell that it's an imitation and it's not real. And that's no exception for this movie. I give the man credit. I at least give the guy credit. He tried to make the tone of this movie consistent with what came before it. Though I do think this movie has some awkward humor thrown in that just didn't come across as funny to me. Not even in an ironic sense. So that's with that. So yeah, that's basically really all I got to say about Mimic 2. It's like, it's not a bad movie per se, but it's not really all that memorable. Aside from adding to the characterization of the mimic creatures by giving their next step of development, which is now they can mimic mankind, and some performances and the cast which puts on decent performances, solid directing, and decent creature effects. The story is just, nothing really to write home about. It's forgettable, but you can watch it. It's a quick watch. It's not offensive, but it's just middle of the road, which is why I'm going to give Mimic 2 a solid 5 out of 10. If you want to watch Mimic 2 just to say you saw Mimic 2, go right ahead. If you don't want to watch Mimic 2, trust me, you're not missing much. So yeah, 5 out of 10 for Mimic 2. Let me know your thoughts in the comment sections down below. Like the video and subscribe, and I'll check you back next time for more.